Welcome to Lighting the Educational Flame, created and produced by educator and author Mark Hoberman, owner and director of Grade Success Tutoring. Mark will be joined by Susan Brender, CEO and host of The Susan Brender Show. The purpose of this program is to offer our listeners a variety of stories dealing with many interesting topics surrounding education. It is our hope that students and parents alike will benefit from the wide range of topics, including study skills, test prep, anti-bullying, sports, music, and more. We hope you enjoy our show, Lighting the Educational Flame.
Hello and welcome to the talk show, Lighting the Educational Flame, brought to you by Grade Success Education. I am Mark Hoberman, and my co-host, as always, is Susan Brender. How are you doing today, Susan?
I'm doing just fine, and I'm glad to be with you.
Great. So nice to see you as usual. You know, this is kind of close to my heart, the guest today, because I've dealt with and done a lot of cyber bullying training, anti-bullying training for camps, for schools, and even some corporate. But the guest today is really going to talk about some predators, unfortunately, they're on the web. I know he's been on your show.
Yes, he has.
The Susan Brender Show. And I think he's going to be able to tell us a lot about what's going on out there. And I think parents are going to find comfort in this and some great advice on how to keep their kids protected.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that's so important, Mark, is that we address this issue of bullying because, needless to say, it's really across the board. It happens all the time. And people are just really frustrated because, you know, now especially the kids can't even go to school. But when they're in school, what a problem that this bullying has. It's just something we've got to stop. And how the question becomes, how do we do that?
Right. And also, our guest today is going to tell us more about even worse or equal to the bullying are the predators out there. And so we definitely want to get a spin on that, on cyberbullying and things of that nature. And of course, the predators that he's going to discuss as well. So let's bring him on.
Okay.
Our guest today is psychologist and the founder of Ipredator, Dr. Michael Nuccitelli. Michael, welcome to Lighting the Educational Flame.
Oh, thank you for having me on, and hoping your followers are both COVID and internet safe.
Absolutely. I hope so too. And so many interesting things to talk about. But before we get really into the Ipredator situation and your tremendous connection with that, when did you first become interested in psychology?
Psychology, I know this is a cheesy story, but for those of your viewers, your listeners that reside in the United States, in the 70s, I was a child. I fell in love with the Bob Newhart show, which my parents watched every week.
Sure.
Suzanne Pleshette, who was the most gorgeous actress on the Bob Newhart show, I fell in love with her. I was in 8th grade. And from then on, I realized in order for me to get a Suzanne Pleshette, I had to become a psychologist. Hence, that's what it began.
That's great. But you never met her, huh? You never met her? Suzanne?
No, unfortunately. God rest her soul. But she was gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Michael, one of the things that I think is really important today is that kids are not going to school. And when they go to school, unfortunately, there's a lot of problems. One of the problems, and I just have to mention it, even though Ipredator is one of the main things that you deal with, is bullying. Bullying is such a horrible thing, and people don't know why. And not only do they not know why, they want to know what they do about it. So do you have some answers that you could give our audience? Because I think it is something that they're very interested in.
Well, I'm assuming when you say bullying, we're talking about offline physical bullying. Cyberbullying, which is the online version of offline bullying, is one of the 8 categories of Ipredator. And bullying and cyberbullying it's incredibly traumatic for the child. And I'm sure everyone here knows that there are 3 types or aspects to the cyberbullying we'll talk about. You have the cyberbully, which is the aggressor, the cyberbullied, which is the victim/target, and then you have the third element, which is the bystander. Now, within the bystander segment, what we're hoping for, and maybe today parents and educators can talk to their students and their children, are the upstanders. The bystander are those that know that there's bullying and cyberbullying going on, but the upstander is the child that does something about it. And what we need to do is we need to encourage children to do something about it. So when they notice, when they, experience, they see one of their friends or a fellow classmate that's being bullied or cyberbullying, it's getting up and having the confidence to do something about it, whether it is telling a parent, whether it's telling teachers and other faculty members, or it's actually, supporting the child that's being bullied. But that's what we need to do, is to recognize and to promote and encourage the upstander.
Let me touch upon that, if I may, because I've done a lot of anti-bullying training in camps and in schools. And to piggyback on what Michael said, and I have to put it in terms of numbers for the kids. The studies have shown that teachers see 1 out of 25 incidents of bullying. They only see it when it happens 25 times, they see it once. But it's rare that bullies in person do it without an audience. So
exactly.
So other kids see almost 95% of the bullying. Mm-hmm. So I would argue that and I think Michael would agree with me, that the upstanders, they're the secret. Because I tell kids, even in 3rd grade, you don't need to be a big guy to tackle the bully. If you say, stop that, it's not nice, 80% of the time it's done. Because if my audience doesn't want to see the show I have on, they're going to go on to someplace else. So that's a tremendous piece. I'm so glad that Michael mentioned that.
And unfortunately, and thank you for starting off with discussing cyberbullying. That's where I spend most of my research. But we are at the beginning of a period of history called the information age. If you do a little research, it's supposedly the internet's birthday is 1983. The period of history, which we're all in right now, the information age, began somewhere in the later 70s. So really, we are at the beginning of a period of history that in effect will last centuries. Information communication technology is becoming truly and enveloping to where children as well as adults, from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed, they are online. And because of the COVID pandemic and virtual learning environments, literally children from the time they're up to the time they go to bed, they are online. I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I'm just very interested in understanding that. Today, we're in this digital age, as you've mentioned, and it's really a tough time because, to be honest with you, there's no communication. There's no, way to kind of really build a community. I mean, you could get a community on the computer, but that's not the way to live.
Oh, exactly. I mean, the big facade is, and again, I'm not here to, to target these wonderfully big social media platforms, although we could do 3 shows on what they're not doing. But just think of the concept in and of itself, social media. It is promoted to all of us that this is a social environment, social media, where we can We can connect with others. But in reality, it's the exact opposite. Again, I'm not a fatalist, but I truly believe information communication technology, social media is gradually, if not already, is creating disconnection. Because now, I won't get into the psychobabble, but interpersonal skills dynamics and people being able to use all 5 senses to learn from one another, that's being lost.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's changing times, and communication has really taken a nosedive. So with all the work you've done in psychology, how did that transition to, and how did that make you become the CEO and driving force behind Ipredator?
Well, for me, originally, I have always been fascinated with the dark side of human consciousness. If you were a criminologist, criminal psychologist, we could certainly say my fascination with the psychopath or the antisocial personality disorder. For those of your viewers that are religious, it would be the understanding of evil. So I have been fascinated for many years trying to understand, it'll probably take me another couple of decades, or at least as hopefully I live long enough, is to understand that aspect. Early on, we're going on about 15 years from now, I was a forensic psychologist, And I conducted evaluations for the criminal courts, the civil courts, and for family courts. And from that point on, I became really passionate about learning about what I call the dark side of human consciousness. In 2006, which is available at my website, I authored the concept called dark psychology. A couple of years went by, and as you learn about the depraved, the pedophile, those that engage in significant deception, well, where better do you go if you want to, one, you want to hide your identity, or two, you want to skew and you want to manipulate others? Cyberspace. And one of the big things I say about cyberspace, and as we know, cyberspace is defined as an abstract, artificial, digital universe. It's not real, right, but yet we treat it as real. But yet individuals, Ipredators, again, there's 8 different categories, but even with cyberbullying, a child or an adult can go online, and if they so desire, they can create an entire profile that it's not them. And that is the fascination with me learning about, why I authored Ipredator, is because now, as we're seeing, whether it's the child cyberbully, whether it's a cyber stalker, cyber criminal, and even online child predators and online child pornography consumers and distributors, they're spending more and more time online. Why? Because they're able to hide their identity. There is no accountability. They're rarely apprehended. And obviously, presently, they are not apprehended and they are not convicted of a crime. These are all aspects that need to occur, but they're not.
Michael, I'm interested in understanding who's in charge, if you will, of trying to find out who these predators are, because there's got to be a way for one of the agencies in the government, perhaps, that really investigates these kinds of things. Because when you get on the computer or when you do something, you're giving away a lot of information, and it's really dangerous in a way. Don't you agree with me on that?
It can be very dangerous. And please, I am not a fatalist. I think, I think information communication is wonderful. It's one of the great, contributions to humankind, but it can be very dangerous. Information, we can only manage, we're at the beginning of the information age, in 3 ways. We can compile information, we can exchange information, and we can disseminate information. Those are the only 3 ways we can do it. We'll see a couple of centuries for now, but for now, those are the only 3 things that can be done with information. But it's those aspects of information that are used, obviously not just to benefit, but what we're talking about today is for the dark side. Our federal and governments, and the federal and government, the FBI, and many of the agencies, and ICE, when we're talking about, online child pornography and trafficking, they're involved. But it's understanding that information communication technology is huge. It is incredibly large. And it's only growing. And the amount of time that people are spending online, again, even for myself, I don't think I'm internet addicted. That's a whole different show. Maybe we can talk about internet addiction someday. Is that from the moment I wake up and when I go to work, I use what with my patients? My notes are on an electronic medical record for many of my patients in my day job. I will use the internet to teach them, to educate them about various different aspects of psychological dysfunction. Then I come home, I do research, and then I do all my volunteer work. And even here today, and thank you, we're sitting here using information technology. So the reality is, this is only going to continue. But going back, if I may, and we can certainly talk about other aspects about Ipredator, but it relates to cyberbullying. We are, those that are watching this right now and going forward, we are the first generation to be presented with the term called cyberbullycide. Now, this is not to say that, adolescent, tween, children, child suicide did not exist. Of course it did. I'm assuming it occurred, has been something that's been going on since the beginning of human civilization. But now, here in the information age, we have this new concept called cyberbullying. And what is that? Is when a child takes his or her life because he or she is being targeted, teased, and taunted online. And that is something that we have to address, because I believe, obviously because of the COVID pandemic, but also in general, I see this as becoming quite problematic as we move on.
Well, with that information, I'm just wondering, I'm sure you can qualify this. How is Ipredator making a difference in the lives of not just children, but their parents?
Well, I'm hoping that with time, again, we're at the beginning of the information age. And unfortunately, the vast majority of my volunteer work, the people that are calling me, and it's, I don't want to say it's embarrassing me, it's embarrassing for us humans out there. But the vast majority of folks that are calling me, they have been told by their loved ones that they're being melodramatic, that they're being crazy, and to turn it off, to block it and move on. So what the family system and the loved ones are saying to these victims, also I like to call them targets, is that you're being melodramatic. It's the worst thing that you can do. Then they go to the court systems, they go to law enforcement. Unfortunately, it falls on deaf ears. As all of you know, when you complain about being targeted, whether it be Facebook, whatever the social media platform is, 90% of the time, unless it's something truly egregious, nothing gets done. So we are presently living at a time where the victims experience what's called victim shaming, and the ability to assert oneself to affect change when you're being targeted, it's not occurring. I'm here, and hopefully if I do this enough, I can work with others to try to change that, because something's got to be done.
Do you sit around with a group of psychologists and discuss ways in which you can really help people? Because I'm sure you want to share your information, and needless to say, you've written books and you've done a lot of things, and it would be very interesting to know, when you sit around with a group of psychologists, whether you're all on the same page, if you will.
Well, I haven't written books. I don't really enjoy writing, but my website, if you were to, compress it, could probably be 3 books. But in terms of speaking with psychologists, my industry, again, I presented in full-day trainings at the end of 2016, and then in the beginning of 2017, in full-day trainings to the psychological associations of Vermont and Colorado. And these were all psychologists. I don't want to, go into detail what I really believe came from that, but I can tell you in my volunteer work, I have spoken, again, this has been going on for 10 years, to many behavioral healthcare professionals. And it's truly unfortunate, because we live in the information age. People, both children and adults, are being targeted. Not only are they the victim, many of them are the assailant. And just like with adults, some of them are very aware of what's going on with their loved ones, their children, and they're doing nothing about it. The unfortunate reality is, and it's still not being done, is that behavioral healthcare professionals need to ask. We're still living in this, and again, I'm not trashing the DSM-5. I have to use the Axis diagnosis, but we need to begin. And this is whether you're a behavioral healthcare professional, whether you're a priest, whether you're a teacher, whatever it may be, you have to begin to ask about an individual's online life. Why? Because they're spending most of their time. But today, psychologists, I won't go into specifics, they will sit down with a patient, and as part of their data collection tool, when you come in the first time or two, it's called a biopsychosocial assessment. And basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to get data to learn about you, your history. Still in 2021, most psychologists do not ask about how much time do you spend online? Do you use social media? They do not explore the aspects of internet addiction. What does it mean to be targeted about the cyber life? It's not being done, and that needs to change, but it's not being done. And I hate to say it because, as a psychologist, I am a representative of the behavioral healthcare professional, and I love my profession. Unfortunately, though, we are acting just like the medical industry, just like most industry, whether it be, white collar, blue collar, professional, or paraprofessional. We are acting as if we live in a pre-information age world.
Mark, I have a question for you. And I know this show is not humorous, but can you imagine if the two of us went to a psychologist, what they wowould find out?
They find out that they need a psychologist. But yeah, I find it so interesting. Was a teacher for over 3 decades, but I was always frustrated. I wanted to be a lawyer, mostly because of the TV shows. We watch the same TV shows, Michael. So I know what you're talking about with that. But that and a psychologist, I find it so interesting. I find my success in school was because of the sense of humor I had and the connection with the kid and asking certain things. I remember once seeing a kid and said, "You look upset today. What seems to be the problem?" My son said to me, "What? Nobody in my school ever asked me that. No teacher ever asked me that." So, we have the expert on with us. So when it comes to helping parents and the children, because there's been such an increase in the internet use among young people, especially during the pandemic, as you mentioned earlier, what advice would you like to give parents to do the best they can at keeping their kids safe?
Well,
specifically on the internet.
For parents, very simple is to set boundaries. It's understanding. I mean, with children right now, in terms of the non-virtual learning environments with they're out of school, with children, and I hate to say with adults too, and I'm not trashing, is online gaming. Online gaming is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And this is where we're seeing many, online users, both child and adults, that are beginning to have to address this idea of internet addiction. Children and adults can get involved in multiplayer online gaming, and they can easily spend 12 to 15 hours a day, sleep, get up, and do it again.
Yeah.
So for parents, it is important to set boundaries and to allow your child to spend a certain amount of time, but then when that time comes, they have to shut it down. And whether it be go to bed or do schoolwork, it is to go outside, and that is very important. That is a piece, Mark, that I think needs to occur. So much time is spent online, and this is all of us, children or adults. We are losing the ability to engage in normal, interpersonal exchange. Right. And
Definitely.
I know this sounds ridiculous, and I mention it every now and then. It's probably been over a year now, prior to the COVID, is that I went to a restaurant and to order some food, and I'm waiting to get my takeout, and I see before me, a couple of tables over, a very attractive couple sitting down, and I have to assume that it was either their first or their second date. And instead of looking at each other with that tentativeness and the embarrassment and all the nonverbal cues of being a little bit anxious, what do they each have before them?
A cell phone.
Their cell phone.
Sure.
Right.
And they're communicating, and looking at their cell phone as opposed to looking at each other and going through that. That small piece, to me, that represents what is going on in society. Right. And that has to change.
Well, I love the fact.
Excuse me, sorry for Mark.
Right.
I just need to tell him, it's very interesting. I have a bunch of friends who, when they go to a restaurant or they go anywhere, they're always with their cell phone, and it aggravates me. I think about it and I say, what are we doing? We want to form relationships, and oh my God, that's all they know.
Seinfeld would have had a field day with
Oh,
a
could you
couple of
imagine?
episodes.
He could have done a whole
only
episode. He could have done a whole season on this.
Right.
And I have to tell you, I love the fact that you mentioned
George Costanza.
Oh, can you imagine?
Oh my
Yes. But also, you mentioned that it was adults too. And I mentioned earlier, so Lighting the Educational Flame is produced by my company, Great Success Education, which is a tutoring agency. And I cannot tell you, and you'll know this is true, but the kids that I have helped with SAT and ACT prep, and my tutors have helped, got into college, worked hard, the number of them who have had to come home and could not stay in college, which was directly related to their poor time management skills, which were adversely affected by multiple hours gaming.
Yeah.
While they should have been doing their papers and stuff, they can't even, they weren't regimented. They had no boundaries at home. They definitely have no boundaries, but now I'm free. I'm in the forest. So, I can do whatever I want. So it's very interesting that you mentioned that. But
well, if I may, Mark, because you're an educator, and and again, what I'm about to say, because I'm always asked, what is your mission going forward, Dr. Nuccitelli? And please, you can go back and look at my other interviews, and I've said it, and this is my mission before I drop dead, is that when I was a child, again, we'll go back not to the Bob Newhart show, but when I was in 8th grade, I had to take health class. And as part of health class, I was introduced, back then we're going back to, a long time ago, introduced to what was called responsible alcohol usage, and then also introduction to safe sex. I believe what needs to occur is that it needs to be compulsory educational requirements in every school across this country, whether it be introduced in middle school or high school, just like health class or wood shop, or where children have to take a class and they are introduced to cyberbullying prevention, how to conduct oneself online, and then maybe internet addiction and basic online safety. And then the most important, which is called digital citizenship. And that essentially is how to conduct oneself online. I think that is imperative. It needs to start as early as possible. And I think it needs to be standard in every school.
Absolutely preaching to the choir on that one, because I've always been a proponent of, you have to combine academic education with character education. Because yes, these are the skills we need, but you could be the greatest student in the world. If you don't know how to talk to your boss, if you don't know how to treat other people, if you don't know how to regiment yourself and set your own boundaries, then I don't care what your GPA is. It's not going to mean anything. So how can people find out more about you and Ipredator?
Well, anybody can go. The 3-dimension is ipredator.co, no M after the CO. Or they can go to the .net or the .org. I own those 3 domains. And at that website, as you'll see, if you spend about 15 minutes, you'll see why I don't need to write a book, although I've been asked.
I've witnessed that. I did some research on you on the site, and I almost felt like an expert afterwards. So, we'll put that website up there, but it has invaluable information.
So, but for all your viewers, everything at my website is public domain. It's educational. You're free to download it or share it. Any of my papers or the 26 assessments, such as the 4 cyberbullying checklists and inventories, you don't even have to give an email address. You just click on it, you download the PDF, you print it out if you want. If you don't like it, blow your nose with it, throw it away, and go elsewhere. But everything at my website is free, and no personal information for online safety purposes is required.
That's great. And I just want to emphasize again, it's definitely invaluable. But Michael, Susan, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise and advice, but it was so important, and keeping your kids safe, there's nothing more important than that. And you're really helping us do that. So high commendations for that. So appreciate.
Thank you. It was an honor being with you guys.
It's great to have you on the show, Michael.
And to tell the viewers, remember to reach out to us on social media. Look for Great Success on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. You can also find me, Mark Hoberman, on LinkedIn. Thanks again to Dr. Michael Nuccitelli for being with us today. Susan, as always, thank you.
My pleasure.
And viewers, don't forget to tune into our next show. This is Mark Hoberman thanking you for watching Lighting the Educational Flame, brought to you by Great Success Education. Have a great day. Michael, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Lighting the Educational Flame with Mark Hoberman. To contact Mark, email him at info@gradesuccess.com.